Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. Today, we're diving deep into the macroeconomic roots of one of India's most complex challenges, unemployment. Now, if you follow the economy, you already know this isn't just about a simple lack of jobs. It's this massive, multi-layered puzzle. So let's look under the hood and really break down what's actually driving this crisis. We're going to zero in on exactly 6 primary, deeply interconnected causes. These aren't just random factors, right? They're totally woven into the country's economic growth, its demographics, and its policy decisions. Getting a solid handle on these 6 pillars is really the only way we can grasp why this crisis is so persistent. To make this super easy to digest, we're going to group these 6 causes into 4 main areas. We've got stalled engines of growth, the resource squeeze, skills and policy mismatch, and finally, the interconnected web. Okay, let's jump straight into that first bucket, stalled engines of growth, which is all about what happens when industrial and agricultural progress just kind of grinds to a halt. Right, so the first major culprit is a super low rate of overall economic growth. Basically, when the non-agricultural sector, especially modern industry, expands at a painfully slow pace, it just doesn't create enough open jobs. But, those workers don't just vanish. Instead, this creates a massive amount of excess pressure that gets pushed directly onto agriculture. Folks who'd normally be working in factories are essentially forced back onto the land. And this leads to what we call disguised unemployment, which is basically when you have way more people working a single piece of land than you actually need. And as that excess labor floods in, it hits our second cause. Agriculture itself is stagnating. These workers are running into outmoded technologies, tiny, scattered plots of land, and a severe lack of multiple cropping. When you combine all those hurdles with an overcrowded workforce, rural workers just get locked into this vicious cycle of low productivity, seasonal, and disguised unemployment. So if industry is too slow to create jobs and farming is too stagnant to absorb the overflow, we really have to ask, what are the physical building blocks needed to house these potential jobs? Why aren't we building the infrastructure to employ this workforce? That question brings us to our second area, the resource squeeze, where we'll look at capital formation colliding with population growth. This is our third cause, a dangerously low rate of capital formation. And look, capital formation isn't just some dry econ buzzword. It's the actual physical creation of essential machinery, power grids, transport networks, and raw materials. Without these physical assets, growth in both farming and industry hits an absolute brick wall. You literally cannot open a new factory or modernize a farm without power, transport, and machinery, right? But here's where the squeeze really happens. That lack of capital collides violently with our fourth cause, rapid population growth. It creates this crazy demographic domino effect. Step 1, rapid growth swells the labor force, meaning more people need jobs. But step 2, more people, means society's spending shifts aggressively toward basic survival stuff, like water, food, and education. Because of that, we hit step 3. Savings and investments drastically decline, which leads straight into step 4. Capital formation is completely starved of funding. So rapid population growth is actively draining the exact resources needed to create jobs for that growing population. It's wild when you think about it. So we've got a growing workforce and shrinking resources to build jobs for them. You'd think macroeconomic policies in schools would be working overtime to fix this, right? Well, that leads us to ask, are our macroeconomic policies and education systems actually aligned with our economic reality? Let's find out in our third bucket, skills and policy mismatch, focusing on artificial incentives and educational gaps. Our fifth cause is the widespread use of capital-intensive techniques. Basically, these are production methods that prioritize heavily imported machinery and technology over human labor. Now, in an economy sitting on a massive surplus of available labor, you totally expect industries to use labor-intensive methods, meaning, hiring lots of people. But instead, they're leaning heavily on machines. So why would they do that when they have millions of willing workers right outside their doors? The answer is a severe policy disconnect. On one hand, you've got this massive surplus of available labor, but on the other, macroeconomic policies are handing out low interest rates, low tariffs on imported capital goods, and huge concessions for investment. The government is essentially making it artificially cheap for businesses to buy machines, completely ignoring the reality of the workforce. They're literally subsidizing the replacement of human jobs with technology. And finally, our sixth cause, a defective education system. The traditional system heavily overemphasizes a general liberal arts education instead of vocational or technical training. So you've got millions of youths graduating, but their skills are just totally disconnected from the country's actual developmental needs. The whole education system is acting like a mismatched puzzle piece, failing to produce the kind of workforce the economy actually needs to grow.
Which brings us to our final section, the interconnected web, where we tie all 6 of these causes together.
Because honestly, none of this operates in a vacuum. Slow industrial growth causes agricultural overcrowding. That overcrowding is made worse by population growth, which then drains the capital needed to build up that industry. And whatever little industry does exist is actually incentivized by bad policy to buy machines instead of hiring a poorly educated labor force. It's this perfect, interconnected storm. Which leaves us with this final thought. To solve unemployment, can we really just fix one cause, or must we untangle this entire web of low growth, resource drains, and systemic mismatches? Understanding these roots is the first real step toward finding a solution. Thanks so much for joining me in this explainer, and keep questioning the systems around you.